The brothel madam was auctioning off a girl's first night. The older woman lifted her hand, tucked the sash into her waist, and exposed her soft lower belly. She raised her right foot and shifted into a more seductive pose, while the other older women shouted from the side to draw in more onlookers. This was the 7th day since the poor girl had been sold into the brothel by her boyfriend. Finally, she gently flicked her fingertip and pointed at a passerby. Cheap foundation could not hide her beauty. In just 1 second, a greasy man was drawn to her beautiful yet unfamiliar face, willing to pay a high price for her first night. When the cloak of morality is stripped away, naked survival instinct becomes the sharpest weapon. Her coming of age with a strange man was closer to the essence of life than any religious ritual, but the madam kept most of the money, handing her only a small portion. Gangubai, however, placed the first earnings of her life over a candle and burned them. Soon, with her lovely face and clever mind, she rose to fame at incredible speed. Countless admirers surrounded her, giving her all kinds of expensive gifts. She casually gave pure gold earrings to other girls, and the madam said nothing. She understood exactly what Gangubai was worth. Gangubai, who knew people's hearts all too well, built her authority and became the leader of the girls. The madam made a fortune off this money tree. Before this, she had always done whatever she wanted, but ever since Gangubai began standing up for the girls, even the madam sometimes had to hold back. Gangubai understood that although this business was not respectable, the girls were still flesh and blood, and they needed rest too. She spent money to take everyone to the movies. The madam did not confront her openly, but secretly remembered Gangubai's provocation. Before long, she used a cruel method to make Gangubai suffer a brutal punishment. 1 year earlier, Gangubai had still been a rich, beautiful girl from a privileged family. She was born into a respected household and had received a higher education. Since childhood, she had lived in comfort and belonged to the upper class. She was determined to become a big movie star. To help her fulfill that dream, her boyfriend, who worked for her lawyer father, took out a train ticket and told her he had already arranged an audition with a director. Gangubai originally wanted to tell her parents the news, but her boyfriend stopped her, saying they should surprise them after everything succeeded. Naive Gangubai stole her father's gold coins and her mother's jewelry as travel money, then boarded the train to Mumbai with her boyfriend. She planned to repay them many times over once she became a star, but instead, her boyfriend took her to a filthy place. The place was like a rotting intestine. The smell of cheap perfume filled mold-covered cubicles, where exhausted women curled up on their beds. A voice said another new girl had arrived, followed by the women's wild laughter. Gangubai did not like this place, yet this was the last time she would ever see her boyfriend. When Gangubai anxiously searched for him, she finally learned that the female director he had mentioned was actually the brothel madam. What waited for her was not love or dreams, but the loss of her freedom, as she became someone else's tool for making money. This brothel district, converted from Victorian-era British buildings, had every mottled brick soaked in desire and violence. Poor Gangubai would rather starve herself than sink into this life. But how could the madam let go of such an obvious money tree? Unlike the other women, who had no homes, no shelter but a roof, and no choice but to sell themselves, Gangubai was educated and understood her own identity. She knew that returning home after being disgraced would mean bringing endless shame upon her family. 6 days later, Gangubai finally decided to face everything. She spread cheap powder across her face. Her heart already turned to ash. The innocent young girl no longer existed. Since her dreams, freedom, and trust had all vanished, she might as well accept it calmly and begin again. The film Gangubai, based on the real-life queen of an Indian brothel district, shows how a young, inexperienced sex worker became the empress who ruled India's red light district. Even more legendary, she became a political figure and persuaded India's prime minister to consider legal protections for sex work. Most sex workers in India entered the trade because they were forced, trafficked, or deceived, yet the law rarely punished traffickers or clients, and instead punished and humiliated these poor women. Gangubai understood that only by rising above others could she change the situation. In just a few months, she became one of the most sought-after women in the red light district. Late one night, Gangubai met a strange client. The man was willing to pay double. After pulling out a gun and a thick stack of money, he slammed Gangubai against the wall again and again, tormenting her with all his strength. When the girls heard her agonized cries, they all ran over to help, but the madam guarded the door and refused to let anyone in. Only at dawn was Gangubai finally sent to the hospital. Gangubai needed 15 stitches in her abdomen, 4 stitches in her lips, and one of her legs was broken. The madam mocked her, saying that when you open the doors for business, you were bound to meet a few sick men. She insisted they could not go to the police, otherwise all of them would be taken away. The girls spoke up for Gangubai, but the madam turned the blame back on them. The madam's gloating did not break Gangubai's spirit. She not only wanted revenge, but also wanted to use this moment to establish her own authority. The man was not just some disturbed client, but a gang member hired by the madam specifically to teach Gangubai a lesson. He carried multiple criminal cases on his back, and his boss was Rahim, the king of Mumbai. Rumor had it that Rahim was handsome, principled, and sincere, respected by both the police and the underworld. Gangubai went alone to the gang leader Rahim to demand justice. She pulled down her shawl, revealing the torn flesh beneath, the stitched wounds still clearly visible. The scar was like a terrifying dragon coiled across her delicate skin. Rahim understood what this meant for a woman. Gangubai's tearful yet unbreakable resolve moved every man in the room. Rahim offered to compensate Gangubai, but she refused. Gangubai only wanted justice and the respect she deserved. Rahim understood what Gangubai was asking for and took her as his sworn sister. He sent dedicated men to protect Gangubai around the clock, but the madam still refused to let Gangubai go. That man actually came back again. This time, Gangubai asked for 4 times the price to keep him steady. The moment he entered the room, he grabbed her by the neck again. Her screams of abuse rang out from inside the room. The madam turned up the radio, deliberately drowning out Gangubai's cries. But suddenly, a convoy of cars stopped at the door. Rahim slowly stepped out, and his men broke down the door, dragging the man in front of him. Rahim struck ruthlessly, beating the man until he was covered in blood. As Rahim's car slowly drove away, Gangubai personally punished the barely conscious man. This scene became a street legend of a hero saving a beauty. In everyone's eyes, Rahim had become Gangubai's backing, and the madam lost her old power. The madam became bedridden, living every day in fear, and soon passed away while holding her jewelry. Gangubai officially took over the place. She divided all the madam's money equally among everyone. For herself, she only took from the jewelry box the key she had secretly taken from her mother years ago. It was the only keepsake she had of her parents. Gangubai cancelled the old rule that 40% of the revenue had to be paid to the police as protection money. How could the police possibly agree? Gangubai proposed bringing Rahim into the matter, and the police instantly lost their swagger, kneeling in respect. Her path of reversal was not built on hot blood and simple courage alone. On the contrary, it was the natural result of carefully reading the situation and gathering resources with precision. She wore a white sari symbolizing purity and power, becoming the Gangubai everyone feared and respected. This was also an honorific Indians revere, almost like a divine title. Although she was the leader of the red light district, she never stopped saving young girls who had been trafficked. A girl sold into the brothel by her husband was painted with gaudy makeup, forced to wear a nose ring, and left bleeding. She cried for 3 days and nights, but still refused to obey. The madam asked Gangubai to persuade her. Gangubai did not beat the girl the way the madam would. Instead, she opened the window and let sunlight into the dark, moldy room. She unlocked the girl's bracelet and listened as she told her tragic story. Most of them had gone through the same thing as Gangubai, sold into brothels by the people they trusted most. Gangubai took out 2 pieces of candy and let her choose. Yellow meant she was willing to stay. Blue was poison, but it could buy her freedom. In the end, the girl chose the poison. Looking into the girl's pure eyes, Gangubai knew this was a woman even fiercer than herself. Gangubai could not help feeling admiration. She demanded that the madam release the girl and give her freedom.
तो कल घर आके 10,000 रुपए लेके जाना.
Gangubai had a clear mind and an unwavering goal. Even in the worst environment, she still kept searching for the possibility of turning the tables. When everyone else passively followed the rules, she dared to challenge them first. At the same time, she kept building her own strength until she could create the rules herself. She had not only courage, but also wisdom. What was even more rare was that she never fell into the trap of worshipping money, and always carried great compassion in her heart. She kept fighting for the survival and rights of all her sisters. In the hazy night of Mumbai's Kamathipura district, Gangubai was like a lotus rising unstained from the mud. Her people advised her that she should not spend 10 times the price to redeem a girl who had nothing to do with her. She said, "This is politics. You would not understand." Gangubai had a much bigger ambition. She understood deeply that simply earning this money was nowhere near enough. Only with the support of legitimate power could every step become stable. She decided to run for district president. Her only opponent was Raziabai, who had already served 2 terms. Raziabai was intersex, dressed in women's clothing but with a masculine face. He held great power and was worshipped by people like a deity. During his vote-seeking parade, the two faced off officially for the first time. In the twilight, Raziabai looked solemn, palms pressed together, eyes full of challenge. Raziabai scattered flowers and promised salvation for all. The torches of his devout followers burned like symbols of victory. No one believed a sex worker could defeat the god in their hearts. In fact, the battle between Gangubai and Raziabai in the film is not only about personal power, but also symbolizes a clash between old and new ideas. It more sharply presents the confrontation between sex workers' rights and traditional social prejudice. Gangubai and the girls may sell their bodies, but their hearts and minds are remarkably pure. Aside from doing work that the public calls immoral, they follow their duties and behave properly in every other way. Yet those outside who do so-called normal jobs often lack even basic kindness and morality. These people occupy all kinds of social resources while exploiting other poor and vulnerable people. Gangubai did not lose heart. Instead, she had her people spread the story of how she had saved trafficked girls. Building even greater momentum, she also went to seek help from the gang leader Rahim. She offered noodles she had cooked herself, hoping Rahim would hand Mumbai's liquor business over to her. That way, not only could they cut out the middlemen and earn the largest profit, but the girls could also make extra money. With the support of 4,000 sisters in the district, she would surely win the election and become district president. At first, Rahim thought Gangubai's appetite was too big, until she said something. "If I win, I can fight for them and make their lives better. Otherwise, Raziabai will only keep making our lives miserable." Rahim changed his original view. He announced that they were officially partners, and Gangubai could receive 20% of the profits. She knelt devoutly to thank him, but Rahim stopped her. Still, she gently touched his toes, then placed her hand over the spot closest to her heart. That day, Gangubai met a special man. A tailor brought his nephew to take her measurements for a custom sari. The young tailor was handsome, gentle, and shy. The warmth of his fingertips awakened Gangubai's deep longing for ordinary love. Among white saris named for moonlight, clouds, white roses, and milk, the young tailor recommended the one most suited to Gangubai. After that, Gangubai often saw the young tailor. He did not know Gangubai's real identity, and only thought she was the daughter of a wealthy merchant. This ambiguity allowed Gangubai to briefly sink into the fantasy of a normal kind of love. As the real ruler of the red light district, Gangubai was used to solving problems through authority, but in love, she could not control the situation. After Raziabai learned that Gangubai planned to run against him for district president, he reported her gang business and secretly colluded with the police to search her place. The police had long held a grudge against her. During Prohibition, Gangubai still made a lot of money selling liquor. If the police found even one bottle, she would face 5 years in prison.
तुझे क्या लगता है गंगूबाई गू खाती है?
The police chief obediently called off the search and left with his man. An officer told Gangubai that Raziabai had ordered this in secret, and only wanted Gangubai to meet him once, but she still refused to give him that respect. So Raziabai simply came to her himself. He threatened Gangubai, saying that as long as she ran in the election, she would be sent to jail. Raziabai believed he was headed for a landslide victory, but the next day, his campaign event was completely empty. Gangubai appeared suddenly, her eyes firm and her whole body radiating the presence of a queen. It turned out she had bought out every film reel in the cinema and invited the whole district to watch movies for free. So there was only one person in the audience below, the arrogant Gangubai. Raziabai was defeated once again, but he deliberately proposed a difficult challenge. Kamathipura was Mumbai's largest red light district, yet no brothel there had ever held a wedding. If Gangubai could get a girl from this place married, he would automatically withdraw from the election. This did not stump Gangubai. One girl had been locked in an iron cage on the rooftop for years. Her mother was a sex worker. Now the daughter was 15, already old enough for marriage. Locking her in the cage was also a twisted way of protecting her. Gangubai thought of the young tailor. He was the only man she believed could give the young girl happiness. When Gangubai came to propose the marriage, the young tailor looked at her in disbelief. The dowry was 350 grams of gold and 250,000 rupees. How could the young tailor's uncle and aunt agree to let their nephew marry the daughter of a sex worker? The young tailor was an orphan, raised by them with their own hands. Gangubai explained that although the girl's mother was a sex worker, the girl herself was pure and innocent, only 15 years old. Seeing that the two elders were still hesitating, Gangubai stood up and left, but the glittering dowry still made the aunt set aside all her concerns. They accepted the marriage. The young tailor, who deeply loved Gangubai, was heartbroken. In the film, the young tailor's gentleness and innocence form a sharp contrast with the world of power and schemes that Gangubai lives in. His existence symbolizes the possibility that Gangubai once had of taking off her armor and enjoying being loved. How could the young tailor understand Gangubai's world? Gangubai explained, "I am building a perfect life for you. You cannot be my lover forever." Gangubai personally pushed away the man she loved in exchange for protection for thousands of sisters. This was the first wedding in the red light district in 100 years. Gangubai wore the sari the young tailor had sewn for her. Pure and beautiful, how badly the groom wished the bride were Gangubai. But Gangubai could only watch the man she loved marry someone else. Gangubai transformed love into the strength to keep fighting. This love without an ending instead became proof of her complete humanity. When the election results were announced, she successfully became district president. She thanked every sister who had given her love and support. Gangubai taught the girls that first, they must treat people with sincerity. Second, whether in a temple or shrine, after the girls provide their services, they must receive full payment. The third point, and the most important one, was never to forget their dignity. But reality was not that simple. The injustice brought by social prejudice still affected the future of the red light district. The women here had no dignity to speak of, and even their basic human rights could not be guaranteed. Banks refused to open accounts for them, hospitals, supermarkets, and even schools refused to let them step inside. Gangubai, newly elected district president, wanted to tell her family the good news. For the first time in many years, she got through to her home phone, but her younger sister told her that their father had already passed away. Before his death, their father had refused to drink water from the Ganges, because he had once said the word for Ganges water sounded like Gangubai's name. For every Indian, drinking Ganges water before death is meant to bring salvation and allow the soul to enter heaven after death. Yet even before dying, her father was still angry with her. Her mother refused to speak with her and demanded that her younger daughter hang up within 30 seconds. In Hindu tradition, a woman's body is seen as a sacred vessel of family honor. The moment Gangubai was sold into a brothel by her boyfriend, her body changed from a holy cup into something seen as polluted. This transformation carried destructive power within the family honor system. Perhaps her parents' refusal to acknowledge her did not come from emotional separation, but from fear that this so-called impurity would spread through blood ties and contaminate the entire family. During the festival of the Holy Mother, Gangubai stopped business. She used a wild, unrestrained dance to hide the extreme pain inside her heart. How deeply she wished she could receive her mother's forgiveness. Unfortunately, that phone call completely ended that hope. What was even harder to accept was that a developer had set his sights on Gangubai's community and wanted to force its demolition. He had already ordered the school to suspend classes. To the outside world, he claimed Gangubai's business had a harmful effect on the children. In the end, he only wanted to make life impossible for the community and take the chance to destroy Gangubai's home. Rahim stepped forward for Gangubai. If the developer caused trouble again, Rahim guaranteed he would receive the punishment he deserved. The school also took Gangubai to court. Rahim warned her to turn fear into strength. Parents began marching in protest, and teachers joined the boycott one after another. Under the banner of protecting morality, they wanted to completely erase Gangubai. For 5 full months, conspiracies and schemes made Gangubai suffer. She finally realized that some things must be broken before they can be rebuilt. She brought the children born to sex workers to meet the principal. She said that the children of sex workers should have the same right to receive an education. They too could become doctors, engineers, and lawyers. She demanded that the principal immediately complete the children's school enrollment. The reporter who was interviewing the principal became extremely interested in the extraordinary woman beside him. He took the initiative to visit Gangubai for an interview, only to encounter children who had just started school and were sent back. Gangubai told the reporter to photograph the scene. She wanted the whole world to see how these children were being discriminated against. People claimed to oppose discrimination against women in the red light district, yet refused to give their children a chance to change their lives. But what wrong had these children done? When the reporter's lens focused on Gangubai for the first time, what he saw was not a weak woman humiliated and damaged by the world, but a dark night queen holding a scepter, with henna-stained fingertips. Gangubai lifted the moral veil covering the brothel district. The sex worker closest to Gangubai had just given birth to a son, but because of infection, her body grew weaker and weaker, and she was barely hanging on. The doctors could no longer save her. The girls combed her hair and sent her off for the last time. She too had been sold here by her husband. Originally, a client had wanted to marry her, but she refused. Gangubai held the poor newborn baby in her arms. That warm, soft little life crying for milk awakened Gangubai's maternal instinct. What comforted Gangubai was that the photo of her and the children appeared on the cover of a magazine. She became the talk of every street in Mumbai. The reporter recommended Gangubai to the Committee for a major women's rights conference. He prepared a speech for Gangubai. This strategically planned self-exposure made the reporter understand the true nature of the exchange. Gangubai needed public opinion as a weapon against gangs and corrupt police, and he needed explosive news to advance his own career. People at the top could also form alliances with those at the bottom, and their cooperation was about to achieve unprecedented success. On the day of the conference, Gangubai arrived early. All the men had finished giving their speeches. Gangubai, the only female speaker present, was arranged to appear last. When Gangubai stood at the podium wrapped in her sari, the reporter's camera was not just a recording tool, but a lever of power. Gangubai no longer held back. Instead, she tore up the speech in her hand, asked someone to bring a chair, and sat down with confidence. She said that everyone present had their own profession, whether doctor, engineer, or teacher. Qualified people make money through their knowledge, but our profession is treated as immoral. She condemned society's injustice. People in the red light district had no basic human rights. Doctors, supermarkets, banks, and schools had no place for them. Now even their home was being taken away. In Mumbai's damp monsoon air, the media event planned by the two of them unfolded like a carefully staged drama. In the reporter's writing, Gangubai was shaped into the Mother Teresa of the red light district. This sacred narrative satisfied the public's hunger for a story of redemption, while also paving the way for legal recognition of a sex workers' alliance. The reporter's work was no longer mere journalism, but a code capable of changing social rules. Every news story about Gangubai loosened another rivet in the caste system and patriarchal society. Gangubai mocked them, saying that the minister who had just spoken also came here often, yet pretended not to know her. The audience instantly burst into laughter. Gangubai said, "Our children, just like your children, can decide the future of India. We too should be able to survive in society with dignity, just like you." Gangubai's powerful speech became a tremendous success. At this time, Gangubai was only 21 years old. Her speech reached the ears of India's Prime Minister at the time, Nehru. To reduce her influence, Nehru invited Gangubai to a private meeting. In a reception room wrapped in warm grey light, Gangubai wore a white sari-like armor. The bindi on her forehead reflected a soft glow. Her silver nose ring seemed like light and shadow, recreating the neon code of Mumbai's brothel signs. The Prime Minister had already heard of her. He praised Gangubai for everything she had done for women. Gangubai got straight to the point and asked the Prime Minister to legalize the work of the red light district. These women of the streets could not be left homeless. They deserved respect and protection from the nation. The Prime Minister was deeply moved and promised to establish a special committee to revisit the issue. Before they parted, the Prime Minister gave the rose on his chest to this resilient woman. This was the highest respect for Gangubai. When she returned to Mumbai, she received an unprecedented welcome. She gave women dignity in a place stripped of dignity, teaching them that even inside a cage, they could still breathe freely. She did not allow a single woman in Kamathipura to lose her home. People thanked Gangubai with India's most sacred color, white. Some called her the Empress of Mumbai, while others affectionately called her sister. Even if history does not record Gangubai, Kamathipura will remember her in its own way. Gangubai's name and portrait remained recorded in the streets and alleys for a full 50 years. In 2008, 69-year-old Gangubai died of cardiac arrest. Her turbulent and magnificent life came to an end just like that. After her death, Kamathipura almost returned to the way it had been before.